Welcome back to another Procreate tutorial. Today we are going to learn how to create this cute digital paper cut for Love Potion number 9. It's spooky season and I wanted to create a potion with some fun extra little effects here. We're going to walk through how to create the middle design and then we will do the paper cut on the outside like we've done in a few other tutorials. Let's jump in. We're going to create a new canvas by clicking on this plus icon right here. I'm going to go ahead and use a square for this. I do recommend sketching this out ahead of time so you know where you want to put everything. I'm going to use a template that I've done for this for a different class, but you can just draw your sketch out by hand as well. You'll end up with something like this, a bottle with a cork in it, a little string around the neck with a tag, and whatever kind of extra decorations you'd like around the side. I'm going to come to my layers and rename this to sketch. And take the opacity down so we can draw on top of this. My template is pretty dark, so I'm going to take this down to about 12 or 13%. If you're using a pencil to sketch, you probably only need to take it to about 30 or 35%. We're going to add a new layer and put that underneath our sketch. And we're going to grab this color palette, Love Potion. I provided this for you at a link in the description so you can follow along. For the bottle, we're going to use this middle gray and just a basic monoline brush. I like to start out with drawing the circle using quick shape. Go ahead and hold at the end, put your finger down on the canvas and let go and you'll get that perfect circle. If you need to move it around, you can do that as well. Then I will zoom in here a little bit by pinching and add the neck of the bottle. Finish off the top here. And then we can just color drop to fill these in. We'll clean up these edges a little bit later. I'm going to do the rim here on another layer because it's going to make it easier to work with these later on. Let's add a new layer above that. And I'm going to grab a little bit of a smaller brush. This is a little bit of a curve. You can hold your pencil at the end to get these straight lines and come across here. Hold to get that arc. And we're just going to color drop inside of that. And we're going to do the cork on a new layer as well. For this, we're going to use this medium brown right here. We can draw an ellipse with quick shape here. I love using quick shape for some of these. It makes it really easy to get the look that you want. We can come down here and use quick shape to make an arc. And you can tap up here to adjust that if it's not quite the way you wanted it. And then we'll just add these straight line connectors. And if you wanted the top of your cork to be a different color, you could color drop in there and put on another layer. For the ease of this tutorial, we're just going to keep it all the same color. So I'm just going to color drop all the way inside there. It looks like it's a different color because we have this sketch layer turned on. If I turn that off, you can see it's actually all one color. Okay, and there's a little spot here that I need to clean up. If I turn my sketch off, you can see there's a little bit of a hole here. So I'm going to take my brush size down and just come in clean this up so it's filling that space. Let's check the other side. The other side looks good. Okay, turn that sketch back on. Next, we are going to do this string here. For this one, I'm actually going to use two different shades of kind of magenta. We're going to use this darker one here for those lines. You could, of course, make your string any color that you want. We're just going to make sure we do this again on a new layer. I like to make that bigger. I like to draw this all in one stroke. I feel like it gives it a smoother look, and then we can go through and erase it. That's the benefit of doing these on separate layers. It's a lot easier to erase these later on. Let's push and hold on our eraser. That'll give us the same brush. And then we can come in here, and anything that's crossing over the front of the bottle here that would be behind, we're just going to erase that right here. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then on the same layer, we can come in and put these lines. And you don't have to follow your sketch or your template perfectly. This is just a guide to give you sort of an idea of where you want things. And then we're going to do the fill color either on the same layer or another layer. It kind of depends what effects you're going to do to it later. Again, for this one, we're going to keep it pretty simple, so we're just actually going to fill on the same layer. Let's grab this color here in the corner, this lighter magenta. And before we do that, actually, I'm going to isolate this by pushing and holding. In order to use color drop, you need to not have any open areas like this. Let's color sample this with our finger. Take our brush size way down and just close this off really carefully right here. So it's going to be behind the bottle. But that will allow us to color drop inside these areas. Otherwise, if we tried to do that, it would spill into the whole page. All right, tap and hold on this check mark to bring everything back. Now we're going to grab this medium color of magenta, and now we should be able to color drop inside of these. Choose continue fill, and then you can just tap through all of these. On the next layer, we are going to do this tag. This, I think, is actually going to be behind the string, so we can drop a layer underneath. Let's grab this light tan right here. Bring our brush size back up and draw this in. Draw a little circle here where that string's going to go. And again, we are going to actually connect this underneath so that we can color drop this. The last thing we're going to add to this before we do our decorations is the potion on the inside. And we can use our selection tools to help with this. Let's go ahead and add a layer right above the bottle here. Choose whatever pink we want, maybe, let's try this medium one again. That looks like a good color. And we're going to make our brush size quite a bit bigger. And we're just going to draw a little bit of, oh, it's way too big. We're just going to draw a little bit of a wave of where we think that potion would go. Let's connect it and color drop. Now, in order to get it to fill the bottle perfectly, we're going to come to our bottle layer, tap Select, and Invert. Come back to your layers and tap on that potion layer and choose Clear. And that's basically going to cut everything that's not in that selection. Now it fits perfectly inside the bottle. On our final layer, up at the top here, we're going to go through and add some decorations. And these can be little stars, circles, twinkles, anything you want, something that looks a little magical. I've got these 3 colors here that I'm going to use, but you can of course do anything that you'd like. For circles, we can of course use quick shape again. And then we'll just color drop to fill these in. Now we can go ahead and turn our sketch off or delete it. And we've got our basic paper layers for our illustration. The next step is going to be adding those outlines. When I add my paper cut frame to my design, I like to keep it pretty organic as I have those frames come in. Let's grab this purple right here, and we're going to add a new layer here at the top and a pretty good size monoline brush. Let's see how big that is. That's pretty good. And just keep it nice and organic. You can of course do circles or squares or any other shape you'd like as well. We're going to add a new layer underneath this and go to our next color, which is this hot pink here. And I like to have these kind of cross over and under, not be a perfect match to the one above it. And then you can just color drop to the outside of that to fill it in. If it doesn't fill in all the way, you can just grab those corners and do that. And we're going to do 2 more layers under this, so let's add 2 layers. We're going to come to this light pink right here. Add that layer in. And I want it to cross over with some of these sparkles here, so I'm making these a little bit bigger. This last layer is going to be this blue. Color drop on the outside. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now we're going to take these layers and put them underneath our artwork. You can multi-select by tapping on one and swiping to the right on the other 3. And then we're just going to drag them underneath all of our art. If you've watched any of my other videos on doing digital paper cut, we're going to follow that same process here. I'll show you one layer and then we'll speed it up and do the rest. So each of these we're going to make into a group. We're going to swipe to the left to duplicate and do that twice, always on the bottom one. Then we're going to select those 3 and group them. Give them a name so that you know what that group is. Especially when they're collapsed, it's going to be a lot easier to stay organized if you know what's inside there. And then on the bottom layer, we're going to select that, turn on Alpha Lock by either tapping the layer or swiping right with 2 fingers till you see this checkerboard. We're going to double tap close to black and then fill that layer with black. Then you can turn Alpha Lock back off. An alternative for this let's call this hot pink, is to do the hue, saturation, and brightness. That's up here in your adjustments. You can take your brightness all the way down to none, and your saturation too. And that will basically turn this black as well. For our middle layers, we are going to make them brighter. So we want to have a good contrast between these top two layers. Come back to adjustments, hue, saturation, and brightness. And we're going to take our brightness up about 60 to 70%. For lighter colors, you don't need to come up quite as far. You just want to be able to have a good contrast here. We're going to go through and do that for all of the groups, the frame, as well as these. I think I'm actually going to combine the tag and the string here by pinching them. Those are going to be on the same layer. If you want to do any shading or any textures or anything to these, you actually should do that before you duplicate them. Let's see, I think I had a texture on this cork here. We can add a layer above this with a clipping mask. You can take black here, grab a little bit of a smaller pen, and if you just come in on the corner here, you can add a little bit of shadow there with a Gaussian blur under adjustments. And that will give a little bit of dimension to that. If you have a texture brush you like to use, you can add that as a clipping mask layer as well. Let's grab a darker brown. And you can play with the blend modes to see what makes it show up. That has a little bit more of a cork texture to it. You can adjust this and play with it however you'd like. What I would recommend is get all of this done before you're ready to do the 3D effect, and then you're going to pinch these so it's all one layer. You only want to be duplicating one for each of these. And for example, on this one, we probably want to make it stand out a little bit from the rest of the bottle. Let's make that a clipping mask. Grab a little bit of a darker gray here. You can grab this soft brush in the Procreate airbrush set and just put some of that texture in here to kind of distinguish it from the neck of the bottle. Again, if it's too harsh, you can blur it a little bit. I think I had some effects on the rest of these, so let me do that real quick and then we'll be right back. Okay, so I've gone in and done a few little small effects to these. I've added a highlight here, a little bit of a shadow effect here, and some edging on the tag. Now what we're going to do is we're going to combine the three parts of the bottle just by pinching them. This will give us a few less layers to work with, layers and groups. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing that we did with our frame for these 4 paper layers in our illustration. Now we are going to zoom out a little bit by pinching. We're going to move our highlights in one direction and our shadows in another. You come down to your bottommost shadow layer, tap on it, and we're going to multi-select by swiping to the right on all these other shadows. Come up to our transform tool, that's this arrow here, and we are going to tap a few times off this bottom left corner. And you can see those shadows starting to show up. Then we're going to do the same thing with our highlights in the opposite direction. Tap your lowermost highlight layer, swipe to the right on all of the others. Come to your transform tool, and we're going to tap a few times off the top right corner. I generally don't move my highlights quite as far as my shadows. It's just personal preference, whatever look you like. This is basically creating the edge of your paper. So it's how thick you want your paper to be. Now we're going to go through and do a final adjustment on our shadow layers. And this does need to be done individually. Let's start with the one for our purple frame. Now, the further over you move your shadow away from its original piece, and the more you blur it, the more it's going to look like it's separated from the piece behind it. If we take our transform tool and move this down just a little bit more, come to our adjustments and go to Gaussian blur, and slide our pencil across the screen. You can see that really nice blur and the separation happening right here. If it's a little too harsh, you can come to this N right here and change the opacity. That's how transparent it is. Change that a little bit. And when I'm done with it, I like to collapse the group just to help me keep track of which ones I've already done. Let's come to the hot pink layer, do the same thing. Move it down just a little bit more and add the blur. We're going to repeat this process for the rest of the frame as well as these pieces here, and then we're going to do one final step. And we could leave the background white, but I like to add a little something to this as well. We're going to come down here underneath all of our groups and add another layer here. For this, we are going to use this yellow right here and just color drop that in there. And I'm going to add a little bit of a glow effect above that. So add one more layer, change the blend mode right here on this N down to add. We're going to use that soft brush again and a little bit of a brighter yellow. And we're just going to add this glow right behind our bottle. And then we can blur that a little bit to soften it. Just gives it a really nice gradient effect behind there. Now, in order to make this look like digital paper, we need to add some texture to this. And there's two ways to do that. The first way is to add texture to the entire piece at the same time. If you come up to the very top and add a new layer, then we're going to add a texture and apply a blend mode to it. If you have a paper texture file, either as a file or a photo, you can go ahead and add that. You need to make sure that it's covering your entire canvas. And then you're going to change the blend mode to overlay. That usually works pretty well if you have enough contrast in your grayscale image. And this will apply the same texture throughout your entire piece. And this works okay, but I generally like the effect of having different textures on different groups. Let me show you what that looks like. This is my sample piece where I have applied different paper textures to different groups. As you can see, different layers of the frame, the bottle, and other elements have different textures applied to them. And I think this just steps it up a notch and gives it another different feel. In order to do this, it does take a little bit more time, but it's not hard. You're basically going to come to the group, add a new layer above that, tap on it and choose clipping mask. Now, when we put this paper layer in here, it's only going to be applied to that group. You can even do this with the same paper texture and just change it around. If I duplicate this and bring it down into this next group, tap on it and choose clipping mask, Now I can come to the transform tool and change the direction or even the size of it, and that will change the look of it compared to the previous group. So it doesn't line up exactly with what's above it. That's another way that you can do this. The last thing we're going to do is just add some text onto our tag. You can have this say whatever you want. Let's add one more layer right above this. If you have a texture on it, you're going to want to put it in between so that the texture is applied to your text as well. And I'm going to choose this dark magenta again. I like Studio Pen for this because it gives it a nice handwritten look. For this one, we're just going to write number 9 for Love Potion number 9. And I'm going to duplicate this. On the bottom layer, I'm going to come to Adjustments, Hue, Saturation, and Brightness. Take the brightness up about 10 or 15% and the saturation down about 5. Come back to Adjustments and go to Gaussian Blur. And I'm just going to blur this a little bit. Just look like it's blending in, like the ink is seeping over a little bit. And now you have a finished piece. I hope that was helpful. I love showing people how to combine creativity and technology on this channel. If you enjoyed it, I would really appreciate it if you took just a quick second to give me a thumbs up down below. It really does help out the channel and just tells YouTube that more people should watch this. If you want to learn some more Procreate tips and tricks, make sure you watch this video next.